You think your dog listens to you because you're his owner, because you feed him, because you trained him, because you're the one in charge. But that's not what's happening. And once you understand what is happening, you'll never look at your dog the same way again. Because your dog doesn't stay close to you out of hierarchy. He stays close to you for a completely different reason. And it has nothing to do with dominance. The real question. Let me ask you something. When your dog follows you from room to room, when he sits near you instead of somewhere else, when he gets anxious the moment you leave, or climbs onto you when you're upset, is that obedience? Is that dependency? Or is something deeper going on? What does your dog actually think you are? Because here's the part most people never question. Your dog does not see you the way humans see owners. That concept doesn't exist in his mind the way it does in yours. Breaking the dominance myth. For decades, we were told that dogs operate in strict hierarchies. Alpha, leader, boss. So naturally, we assumed that if our dog listens, it's because he sees us as the leader. If he obeys, we're dominant. If he hesitates, we've lost authority. But modern behavioral research tells a very different story. Dogs do not structure their world primarily around dominance. They structure it around security. And that changes everything. Because if security is the core of how your dog understands the world, then who are you in that system? The secure base researchers studying dogs and their humans discovered something fascinating. Dogs display what's called secure base behavior. It's the same pattern seen in young children. A child explores the world but constantly checks back to their parent. Not because the parent is dominant, but because the parent is safety. Dogs do the same thing. At the park, they run, they sniff, they explore. But they repeatedly check where you are. They glance at you. They circle back. They stay within range. Why? Because you are the reference point. You are the emotional anchor. You are the stable center they orient around. And that role is far more powerful than owner. Think about your own dog. When fireworks go off, where does he go? When a stranger approaches and he's unsure, who does he look at? When you're upset, why does he suddenly sit closer? That isn't hierarchy. That isn't submission. That is emotional calibration. Your dog reads your nervous system, your tone, your breathing, your posture, your subtle shifts in energy. And he adjusts himself accordingly. Not because you are the boss, but because you are the emotional reference point. If you are calm, he settles faster. If you are anxious, he becomes alert. If you are tense, he may become restless. He is not responding to your authority. He is responding to your state. And that's a very different kind of influence. The uncomfortable shift. Here's something most people don't want to hear. If you come home stressed and your dog becomes reactive, that's not random. If you're overwhelmed and he becomes clingy, that's not coincidence. If you're inconsistent and he seems confused, that's not defiance. He regulates through you. You are not just giving him commands, you are giving him emotional structure. Without realizing it, your dog has built his internal world around your stability, not around your power, what you really are. So, no, your dog doesn't wake up thinking, this human legally owns me. That's a human concept. What he experiences is something entirely different. When he looks at you, he sees predictability, safety, direction, connection. He sees the place he returns to when the world feels uncertain. He sees the center that keeps everything aligned. Your dog doesn't see you as his owner. He sees you as the emotional center of his world. And once you understand that, you start to realize something even deeper. If you are the emotional center of his world, what happens when that center feels unstable? What does that mean for the way you show up every single day? That's where this gets even more important. And that's what we're going to explore next. You're not the leader. You're the nervous system. Most people think dogs are constantly asking, who's in charge? But that's not the real question your dog is asking. The real question is, am I safe? And the answer to that question is you. Your dog doesn't organize his world around dominance. He organizes it around regulation, around emotional stability, around predictability. In the wild, survival depends on reading the emotional state of the group. If the pack is calm, it's safe. If the pack is tense, something is wrong. And inside your home, you are the pack, which means your emotional state becomes the emotional climate of his world. You are not just the leader. You are the nervous system he sinks to. Emotional contagion is real. There's something called emotional contagion. It's when one nervous system automatically mirrors another. Humans do it. Babies do it. And dogs? They are masters at it. Studies show that when owners are chronically stressed, their dogs show elevated stress hormones too. Not because something is happening to the dog, but because something is happening to you. Your dog doesn't need you to cry for him to feel it. He notices. When your tone gets sharper, when your breathing gets shallow, when you move differently, when your energy shifts. He doesn't understand your thoughts, but he understands your state. And over time, that state becomes his. Why some dogs become anxious. Have you ever met a dog who seems overly attached, constantly alert, unable to relax, easily triggered? Sometimes we label it separation anxiety. Sometimes we call it a sensitive dog. But sometimes, it's a dog trying to stabilize a human. When you're emotionally unpredictable, your dog works harder. He watches more. He anticipates more. He stays alert longer. Because if the emotional center of his world feels unstable, he has to compensate. This doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It means your bond is deeper than you realized. Your dog is not reacting to the world. He's reacting to you reacting to the world. The hidden weight dogs. Carry. Here's the part people don't talk about. When your dog absorbs your stress long-term, something changes. He may become more reactive, more protective, more clingy, more withdrawn. Not because he wants control, but because he feels responsibility. And that responsibility was never meant to be his. Dogs are wired to co-regulate, but they are not wired to carry chronic emotional weight alone. If the emotional center of their world is constantly overwhelmed, they stay on guard, and when a dog lives on guard long enough, it becomes his personality. But it didn't start as personality. It started as attachment. The power you didn't know you had. Now here's the empowering part. If your dog mirrors your stress, he also mirrors your calm. When you slow your breathing, his breathing slows. When your voice softens, his body relaxes. When you regulate yourself, he doesn't have to compensate. This is why calm leadership works. Not because you're asserting dominance, but because you're providing stability. You're telling his nervous system, you don't have to be on alert. I've got this. And in that moment, he can finally rest. Not because he sees you as his owner, but because he sees you as his emotional anchor. But there's something even deeper happening. Because your dog doesn't just respond to your emotions. He builds his identity around them. And in the final part, we're going to talk about something most owners never consider. How your inner world shapes who your dog becomes. Not temporarily, but permanently. Because once you understand that, who your dog becomes around you. There's something even deeper happening beneath everything we've talked about. Your dog doesn't just react to your emotional state. He adapts to it, and over time, he builds himself around it. Think about that for a moment. Your dog's confidence, his calmness, his reactivity, his attachment style, none of it exists in isolation. It develops in relationship to you. Dogs don't grow independently from their environment. They grow inside it, and you are the most powerful part of that environment, which means something most people never consider. The way you exist emotionally shapes the way your dog exists behaviorally. The identity mirror. Have you ever noticed how different your dog acts with different people? Calmer with one, more anxious with another, more playful with someone stable, more alert with someone tense. That's not coincidence. That's adaptation. Dogs are identity mirrors. They adjust who they are based on who you are being. If you're grounded, they lean into calm. If you're reactive, they lean into vigilance. If you're inconsistent, they lean into uncertainty. And here's the subtle shift most people miss. Your dog is not choosing these traits. He's developing them. Because in his world, survival depends on alignment with you. The responsibility no one talks about. This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because once you realize your dog sees you as the emotional center of his world, you realize something else. You are not just influencing his behavior. You are shaping his nervous system, the way you handle stress, the way you respond to frustration, the way you recover from hard days. Your dog is learning from all of it, even when you think he's not paying attention, especially then. And here's the question that might feel uncomfortable. If your dog became more like you emotionally, would that be a good thing? Sit with that for a second. Not to judge yourself, but to understand the power you hold. The quiet power of regulation. Most people think improving their dog means better training, stronger commands, more consistency. But sometimes the biggest shift doesn't happen in your dog. It happens in you. When you slow down before reacting, when you breathe instead of snapping, when you regulate instead of escalating, your dog feels the difference instantly. And when he feels safety, he doesn't need to compensate anymore. He doesn't need to stay hyper alert. He doesn't need to be overly protective. He doesn't need to cling, because the emotional center of his world feels steady, and steady changes everything. Boss, the relationship redefined. This is where everything comes together. Your dog doesn't see you as an owner. Ownership is a human concept. What he experiences is connection. He experiences you as the place he returns to, the energy he aligns with, the rhythm he synchronizes to, the signal that tells him whether the world is safe. That's deeper than hierarchy. That's deeper than obedience. That's attachment. And attachment shapes identity. Not just his. Yours too. Because when you become more aware of your emotional presence, you change. And when you change, he changes. Not because you forced him, but because you became steady. So the next time your dog looks at you, don't just see a pet. See someone whose entire emotional world orbits around yours. And ask yourself one simple question. What kind of center am I becoming? Because he doesn't see a boss. He doesn't see a title. He doesn't see ownership. He sees the emotional gravity of his world. And whether you realized it or not, you've always been more than his owner. You've been his anchor. And anchors don't control, they stabilize. If this changed the way you see your dog, there's a lot more beneath the surface of their behavior. That's what this channel is about.